Sean dropped the cigarette on the driveway, extinguished it with his foot, and said, quote, "Let's go get this shit over with." Right then, I said, man, this is the guy.
Baton Rouge predator Sean Vincent Gillis confessed to murdering 8 women across Louisiana between 1994 and 2004, stalking, strangling, and mutilating his victims. Desperate for attention, Gillis followed the news, photographed his crimes, and kept grisly trophies to relive them.
You've ever heard of Walter Mitty? Secret Life of Walter Mitty. That's the life I have been leading for about the past 8 years. Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Secret Life of Sean Gillis. Jekyll and Hyde.
Hi, I'm Nick from True Crime Uncut. Welcome to Questions With. This week we're speaking to Major Todd Morris from the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office. What was happening in Baton Rouge at the time these murders took place?
For several years in Baton Rouge in the late 1990s, early 2000s, there were numerous homicides which were occurring in the Baton Rouge area. Some of the victims have a high-risk lifestyle, meaning they were involved in drugs, prostitution, and then some of the other victims were from the affluent background. There were 2 different types of victims. In February of 2004, one of the latest homicide victims' remains were discovered and identified as Donna Bennett Johnston. She was nude, had a lot of post-mortem cuttings and some dismemberment, and that victim's injuries were immediately connected to several other victims in the Baton Rouge area starting in 1999 that had the similar type of post-mortem cutting, and some dismemberment and body parts had been removed. In February 2004, a new task force had been formed to focus on the victims who had not been related and identified as victims of Derek Todd Lee. The victims from 1999 up to 2004, their bodies had a lot of post-mortem cutting. Strangulation was identified as the cause of death, which was totally different from Derek Todd Lee.
How did the new task force begin its work?
When the task force was formed in March of 2004, the investigators from numerous agencies began obtaining the crime scene photographs, all the documentation related to a lot of the unsolved homicides, which had not been directly connected to with evidence to Derek Todd Lee. There was a lot of going back through the evidence, going back through the cold cases, reviewing witness statements, evidence that had been recovered, and looking at the crime scene photographs, trying to determine whom we were looking for now. We had some, witnesses that would come forward who knew the victims, and they, talked about, who their friends were, who they were identified being with, so we could go back and try to find one particular person that might have some very specific information where they might have seen the last victim with, or a witness that might have been with the victim prior to them being a victim of a homicide. Just doing a victimology on each of the victims, trying to see if there was any relationships between the victims, any friendships, what might have led them to be the next victim. And the one particular connection appeared to be they had, high-risk lifestyles. One of the victims that we identified, Catherine Hall, she was located in the southeast part of the parish in a kind of a rural area, but a new subdivision development was taking place. Catherine's remains were left nude. None of her personal items were located there, and she had been laid out in a kind of a posed position beneath a dead-end sign.
What physical evidence first connected the cases?
As investigators began, looking through the photographs, looking at physical evidence, there had been a hair with a root attached that had been recovered from the mouth of Catherine Hall. That had produced a profile by the Louisiana State Police Crime Lab, which became a focus point, knowing that we had a profile of an individual. At that time, in 2004, the profile that had been obtained from the hair from Catherine Hall had been entered into a database with known profiles which had been collected and processed at the time of offenders. However, the database was extremely small in 2004 because legislation had just been passed after the arrest of Derek Todd Lee, which allowed for arrestees' DNA to be collected upon time of the arrest for all felonies and certain misdemeanors. So therefore, there wasn't a huge database to run their profile against to try to identify a suspect. As the investigation unfolded and we began looking at other cases, we noticed that on Johnny Mae Williams, there was a hair shaft that had been recovered. That hair shaft was sent to the FBI lab to do mitochondrial DNA to obtain a profile which matched the profile that had been obtained from the hair root of Catherine Hall. And so therefore now we're getting physical evidence with the profiles of two of the victims now being connected. And then I spoke about the victim, Donna Bennett Johnston. In processing her remains, we were also able to obtain a DNA profile from a contact swab taken from her fingernail scrapings. And Louisiana State Police Crime Lab processed the DNA evidence from Donna Bennett Johnston, which also produced a profile. That profile was the same profile obtained from Catherine Hall and Johnny Mae Williams. Therefore, we knew we were looking for the same suspect in each of these cases. And unfortunately, the three profiles did not hit to anyone in the CODIS databank because there was a limited amount of profiles in the state CODIS databank in 2004.
How did a tire track become an important clue?
During the review of the crime scene of Donna Bennett Johnston, the individual would have had to pull off the roadway off of Ben-Hur into a small wooded area adjacent to a creek. It had been raining. There were some ruts there leading through a gate opening in the fence that drove into a field adjacent to the creek. There were several tire tracks there, and we began looking at those tire tracks and impressions which had been left in a small, muddy little rut area there from the amount of traffic pulling in and out. However, the tire tracks looked fairly fresh, and so the crime scene investigators were able to take an imprint and casting of the tire impression from the crime scene of Donna Bennett Johnston. And research was done with local tire dealerships, which identified the potentially that tread pattern matched the Goodyear Aqua Tread 3 tire. We contacted the local Goodyear representative, showed him a photograph of the imprint obtained from the crime scene to see if he recognized that tread pattern, which he immediately said, yes, this does look like a Goodyear Aqua Tread 3 tire pattern. The task force subpoenaed all the area Goodyear tire distributors, trying to identify anyone that purchased these tires. We received a list of approximately 200 individuals who had purchased the Aqua Tread 3 tire. That information was divided up to the task force members to go and identify these individuals, ask them a series of questions to try to either include their vehicle as having left those tire tracks or exclude them, and identified whether or not is this a potentially suspect vehicle or just someone that drove into this area like numerous other people have.
With the DNA links established and a distinctive tyre print, the task force finally had a short list of suspects, and one name began to stand out: Sean Vincent Gillis. We now have a free Patreon and a Discord server. We'd love you to join us on both. You can check them out right here. But now, back to Todd. Who flagged Gillis to the task force?
Jeff Methan, a special agent of the FBI, had the name of Sean Vincent Gillis as one who had purchased a set of Goodyear Aqua Tread 3 tires. Jeff Methan had arranged a meeting to go by and speak with Sean Gillis, which very quickly focused our attention toward Sean Gillis. Jeff called back to the task force, spoke to Sergeant Brian White at that time, and said, you're not going to believe this, but Sean Gillis placed himself at the crime scene, knew one of our victims, and talked about how he had been following the investigation of 3 of the victims, which we were investigating. While interviewing Sean, Jeff asked for a DNA swab, which Sean provided. Shortly after that, myself, Louisiana State Police Trooper Jerry Mitchell, and Jeff Methan drove back to Sean's residence to make contact with Sean. We wanted to talk to Sean a little bit more, ask him some questions, and see if he would accompany us back to the office to try to help us. I told Sean that he might be able to help us with this investigation because he indicated that he was friends of Johnny Mae Williams and knew her. And so Sean, he agreed, and he said, hey, before we leave, can you go in? I want to tell my wife where we're going in case it gets dark and I'm not back home. I thought that was very interesting, that he was worried about not coming back home. We proceeded to make contact with Terry Lemoyne, his common-law wife, informed her that Sean was accompanying us to the sheriff's office. As we were walking out the residence and standing in the driveway talking to Sean for a minute, he said, do you mind if I smoke a cigarette? We said, no, go ahead. Sean smoked about half of a cigarette there in the driveway while we talked with him. Sean dropped the cigarette on the driveway, extinguished it with his foot, and said, quote, "Let's go get this shit over with." And right then, I said, man, this is the guy. I called Sergeant Brian White immediately and said, hey, we have the right guy here. You just had that sense with his demeanor, the two statements that he had made just right there at his residence about if I don't come back home and let's go get this over with. We felt like right then, hey, Sean is going to be our primary suspect now.
What did Gillis say about his relationship with Johnny May Williams?
While interviewing Sean, he indicated that he had known Johnny May Williams for several years. During the time he met Johnny May Williams, he was a store clerk at a local convenience store behind his residence across from a retirement center where Johnny May Williams was working at the time. He and Johnny May became friends. They smoked marijuana together. He would provide money to Johnny May to buy marijuana for her and for himself.
It was definitely more of a buddyship and mutual codependency. Now, she depended on me for money to get her drug of choice, and I depended on her while she was at it to pick up mine. And I genuinely liked her, and it seemed that the feeling was mutual.
How did Gillis explain being at the crime scene on Ben Hur Road?
While Sean was at the sheriff's office, Jeff Methan interviewed Sean, Max Sheely interviewed Sean, trying to talk with him, glean some information from Sean, ask him various questions about his relationship with Johnny May Williams, about why his tire tracks were left at the crime scene of Donna Bennett Johnston. His explanation of why he was at that crime scene was he was returning home from a friend's residence. He had drank several beers and he needed to use the bathroom very badly. And so therefore, instead of driving to his residence, which was really a half a mile away or a mile away from the crime scene, he decided to pull off the roadway off of Ben Hur and use the restroom before driving on to his residence. That location is really within a mile or from Sean's house. The explanation which he provided, it didn't make a lot of logical sense to the task force. He had driven past a McDonald's, he had driven past several places where he could have stopped and used the restroom. His explanation of why he stopped to urinate just raised all sorts of flags, as long as with his statements, placing himself at the crime scene, knowing Johnny May Williams, that began just solidifying to us that, we had the right individual.
Did Gillis give any reason as to why blood might be found in his car?
While Sean was at the sheriff's office during the interview process, Captain Sheely asked him, were there any reason why blood would be inside of your vehicle? And Sean said, oh, yes, there could be. My girlfriend, Terry Lemoyne, she has seizures, and she was having a seizure one day while on her menstrual cycle, and she bled all over the car. So, yes, there could be some blood inside my vehicle, but it was from Terry. That explanation of why blood might be in his vehicle, did not make sense to us. Detective Jared Ruiz was tasked with going and interviewing Terry Lemoyne as soon as he implied that Terry was in the car. And Detective Ruiz, interviewed Terry, asked her, did you have a seizure while on your menstrual cycle which caused you to bleed inside of the vehicle? And Terry was puzzled and said, no, I've never done that. So therefore, there was, once again, another little clue that, we had on the right track with his explanation of why blood might be inside of his vehicle. Meanwhile, we're still waiting on the crime lab, who is processing his buccal swab for those results to see if his DNA compares to the 3 known profiles which we had obtained and linked together from Catherine Hall, Johnny May Williams, and Donna Bennett Johnston.
How was the DNA match finally confirmed?
Sean was brought home, kept under surveillance while we were anxiously waiting the results from the State Police Crime Lab. When we received a phone call from Dr. Joni Wilson from the Louisiana State Police Crime Lab, Joni said, I have great news. The buccal swab, which had been obtained from Sean Gillis, produced a DNA profile which matched the profiles left at the crime scenes of Catherine Hall, Johnny May Williams, and Donna Bennett Johnston.
How did the arrest unfold?
After obtaining the search warrant and the arrest warrant for Sean, the SWAT team executed the search warrant at his residence. When task force members made contact with Sean after he was detained by the SWAT team, Sean was aggravated because we used the SWAT team to execute that warrant. Sean said, all you had to do was just knock on the door, and I would have answered. Terry was very confused about the events that was unfolding and shocked when she was told that he was being arrested for 3 homicides. Terry was also brought to the sheriff's office to be interviewed that night along with Sean, while crime scene personnel from Louisiana State Police and the sheriff's office began processing Sean's residence.
What happened during the interrogation?
During the second interview with Sean after his arrest, he began to confess to his involvement in Donna Bennett Johnson, Catherine Hall, Johnny Mae Williams.
Miss Donna was the only true successful go out for a hunt, but to where I successfully started with a goal, captured and killed. I noticed she was very drunk. I mean, we're talking drunk. You could literally smell the alcohol. The car smelled like a brewery. She just fell back asleep, literally passed out. Okay. You know, and at that point, it's just I didn't even need to stealthily get the tie wrap. I just sort of just casually picked it up, stuck it on her head, pulled her head forward, dropped it on her. She still didn't wake up. Then she woke up.
During the interviews with Sean, which were conducted that night and several days afterwards, Sean confessed to a total of 8 homicides. The original 3, which he was arrested on, which connected him forensically to the victims through DNA. And then he started giving specific details about 5 other victims which Sean had targeted. Sean described how his first victim, Ann Bryan, which occurred in 1994, who was a resident of a nursing home. Sean, described how he attacked Miss Bryan while sleeping one night.
Security was amazingly lax, and I see a window open, but the blinds, curtains were open, and Miss Bryant was in there, took her bath, got out, and then proceeded to lay in the bed. At that point, found a door open. From that door, went into the hallway, and first doorknob I came to was hers. It was open. And I went in. I just wanted her to be quiet. This was not what I was there for. And that's when I cut her breast and cut open her midsection.
I don't know if you've ever seen a person's just freshly cut open or something, that the bone is just beautiful, like a pearl.
Sean went on to describe how he identified Hardy Schmidt. Sean observed Hardy jogging early one morning in an affluent neighborhood in Baton Rouge.
First few times I was just passing by, but then, I was consciously there. Several other times after that, at times she would be jogging, but never with the thought of doing this individual any harm. I didn't know her. One could probably say I was stalking her, but again, not consciously, not until that day. When I acted, did I have a clue what I was going to do? No, that day there was just something about the bounce of her hair or something as simple as that. That was just, I was in that zone then. I thought you understood this about me, that if I could do this without taking a life, but still have the remnants of a life, I would.
While I was interviewing Sean about Joyce Williams, Sean began to describe to myself and Detective Mitchell, Louisiana State Police, how he observed Joyce Williams walking in a neighborhood late one night, asked her if she wanted a ride. Joyce gets in the vehicle with Sean as they began driving. She had smoked some crack cocaine, and they were driving and listening to the music and singing. Sean went into detail about driving over the Mississippi River Bridge, which is leading outside of Baton Rouge, and Joyce made the comment to him that if I wasn't with anyone else, I'd be feeling nervous right now. And Sean said, to himself, he thought, you have no idea. Sean proceeded to a remote area in a sugarcane field in West Baton Rouge Parish where he killed Joyce Williams. Of course, he utilized the plastic zip tie, which was leaving very defined marks on our victim's neck. And he said Joyce needed to use the restroom. She got out to squat in the sugarcane field where he saw the zip tie in his back seat, decided that this was going to be his next victim as he placed the zip tie around Joyce's throat. However, as he began to do that, Joyce stood up and therefore catching the zip tie around her mouth area. And he said she was very strong. It was like I had the tiger by the tail as she was running around and dragging Sean. And he convinced her, "Stop, I will get this off of you." And he said that was her mistake because as he loosened the zip tie and she stood up placing the zip tie around her note, which he immediately tightened back up and suffocated her. Upon bringing Joyce back to his residence, Sean described how beautiful Joyce's legs were. He became very obsessed with her legs and removed a knife there and began removing her legs. He utilized a knife and a hacksaw to begin dismembering Joyce. While trying to remove her second leg, the hacksaw blade broke and he didn't have another hacksaw. And that was very important detail because when Joyce Williams's remains were recovered, they were discarded the next day in Iberville Parish along the Mississippi River is where he discarded them. It was 2 months before her remains were recovered, and then her remains on her femur was a very distinct saw mark, which was described by Sean during his confession. And so, therefore, we knew that Sean would, he'd like to embellish some things. Of course, he was in the limelight while he was describing the acts that he committed upon his victims, and he relished that. He enjoyed that. But that was a piece of evidence, physical evidence, because when her remains were recovered, you could see in her femur a very distinct saw marking halfway through her femur there, which matched what Sean was describing. And so he was very graphic in his details in describing how he would mutilate his victims, how he did the post-mortem cutting, how he would be sexually aroused with the victims, all post-mortem. While interviewing Sean, it was very easy to develop a relationship with Sean. He was very forthcoming, but he wanted to tell his story also too. He wanted to enjoy the limelight, describing everything he had done, trying to embellish some of the facts, and we knew that because he was the center of attention now nationally with having confessed to 8 homicides. But he was very easy to have a conversation with. When we'd pick Sean up and bring him back each day to continue speaking with him, interviewing him, he'd ask, "Hey, can you turn the radio on? Hey, can I listen to Rush Limbaugh for a minute while we're driving?" Because Sean drove us around to each location, identifying areas where he discarded the remains of victims which he had taken, discarding their personal items. And so we backtracked each homicide investigation from Lafayette to Baton Rouge and beyond, where he discarded the personal effects from each victim. And so we kind of developed a rapport with Sean. He's not like some scary, evil person with this arrogant demeanor. He was just wanted to tell a story.
You kill one person, you're really sick about it. Like I was explaining with the Rwandan people and the massacre of the Tutsis. After you've killed a few, honestly, it's bad, it's repugnant, but you can live with yourself more. You can. I don't like living with myself, but I guess that's the part that makes me, and regular people.
How did Gillis feel about not being the only serial killer in Baton Rouge?
While interviewing Sean, he talked about following the victims of Derek Todd Lee. He had newspaper articles. He was following those investigations. He would also, describe it at night, while he was riding around prowling, or if we talked to him about another victim, he would say, "Oh, no, that's not me. That was Derek Todd Lee." He was very proud of the victims related to him, which he described in great detail, how he chose them, how they became victims, and then the acts which he committed post-mortem on each of the victim, involving cutting, dismemberment, and how he thought he might like to be accountable.
What evidence was found in Gillis's home and car?
While processing Sean's residence for evidence, we took his computer, newspaper articles. Of course, on his computer, he had the information about Derek Todd Lee. He had also had photographs of his latest victim, Donna Bennett Johnston, which he had taken and posed her in the trunk of his vehicle. Fortunately for us, one of the photographs of Donna being displayed in the trunk of his vehicle, you could see a portion of his license plate. Once again confirming, we already had scientific evidence. Now we have a photograph of his license plate with Donna Vincent Johnson posed in his trunk prior to him discarding her remains. Sean always kept his remains for hours through the night and sometimes be discarding them the next day because he'd have to clean up the house. The victims would be placed in his vehicle because he'd have to go pick up Terry from work that morning when she'd get off him after working the night shift. And so several times Sean had these victims in his vehicle, in the trunk, when picking up Terry.
What stands out about the investigation?
I was very fortunate to be a part of a task force of a lot of great investigators. It was very important for us to try to find the answers to these horrific crimes that had been taking place and identify the suspect. The task force, including myself, we were very, elated when we were able to put the pieces of this puzzle together and identify Sean Vincent Gillis and bring some closure to our victims' families. There were a lot of man-hours investigated by the task force members in trying to identify the suspect who we wanted to hold responsible for killing all these innocent victims. We are very committed to seeking out the truth, very dedicated investigators who want to identify the suspect, build a case which is prosecutable, and get a conviction, and we were very fortunate to be able to do that.
In 2008, Sean Vincent Gillis was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He's currently serving his time at Louisiana State Penitentiary. For more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel, don't forget to give us a thumbs up below, and make sure you click that hype button. I'm Nick from True Crime Uncut, thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.